Hello everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As always, if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. So, before we get into the topic of this episode, I would like to go ahead and point out that this will be my 100th episode. Yes, I cannot believe I have done 100 of these now. So, before we get into it, I just want to give everybody who listens to this a thank you from the bottom of my heart, whether you started on episode 1, or you started last week, or anywhere in between. Thank you for tuning in and subscribing and leaving me nice comments and basically making it something that is an enjoyable experience for me. Hopefully you guys enjoy it too. So yeah, I just wanted to give everybody a thank you and a shout out before we started getting into the topic of this episode. And it's kind of funny that this ends up being the 100th episode. It's kind of apropos in a way because it's a really weird political Twitter battle that isn't about us per se, but it actually really is about us. And when I say about us, I mean about libertarians. But right now it's kind of percolating over in conservative land, so it all kind of started with drag queen story time. Which, if you do not know what drag queen story time is, I should think that the title of it would be self-explanatory. There is a group of drag queens across the country in various places who go to libraries, other public places. They've gone to some schools, although the only schools I've seen them in are in Brooklyn, which is, I would assume, an area where the parents would be perfectly okay having a drag queen come read stories to children. That's what it is. So, of course, this is very controversial to some people because drag queens. And I told you, this is the dumbest thing. And it's like, I can't believe it's still going. Like, this is the weirdest feud ever. So, what had happened was, Sohab Ahmani, who is the op-ed editor for the New York Post, posted up a tweet probably about, it's got to be a little over a week ago now, because we're almost on to like week 2 of this controversy, which is an insanely long time for any controversy to go on Twitter. Anyway, he puts out this tweet, and this is not verbatim, obviously, but to the effect of, my God, I cannot be part of some conservative movement where everybody isn't equally pissed off about drag queen story time and the abomination that it is. And so, everybody was just kind of like, bruh, calm down. Bruh did not calm down. He wrote a whole piece for the outlet First Things, attacking David French, and basically inventing David Frenchism, which did not exist before this article. So he invented a movement in order to show that he is not down with said movement that did not exist before the article that he wrote existed. I told you guys, this is nuts. Like, this is just the craziest shit I've ever seen. So, he puts out this article attacking David French. Now, if you don't know who David French is, he is a lawyer. He writes and is a senior fellow for National Review, was president of FIRE back in the mid-2000s, and FIRE is the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education. He's an Iraq war vet. He's an outspoken Christian. He is very, very, very pro-life. Obviously, this is the kind of dude that, up until drag queen story time, pretty much ticked all of the boxes of what you would think would be like a model conservative. But apparently, David was not mad enough about drag queen story time because amongst David's other qualifications, he is also of the kind of libertarian bent. He is not a libertarian, but he leans libertarian on issues such as civil liberties and personal autonomy, and the idea that just because you don't personally want to live your life in a particular way, that doesn't mean that everybody else can't, and that everybody kind of gets to choose their own path. You know, the kind of the classic liberal sort of idea of personal autonomy and personal liberty. So, because of that, apparently, Ahmani decided that David French needs to be excommunicated from the conservative movement and wrote a whole piece about it. And It's nuts. And there's been so much light and heat about that particular piece. I mean, there's been thought pieces about it, and thought pieces about the thought pieces, and podcasts about the original piece and the thought pieces. And this is interesting in that this is kind of where this whole thing started, this whole new schism in the conservative movement, but it actually goes back a little further than that. Actually, if you want to take it all the way back, you can go back to January to Tucker Carlson's very infamous monologue, and if you want to go into my back catalog, I did a whole episode on that monologue back in January. But back in March, the outlet First Things published a manifesto, for lack of a better word. I think it kind of kicked off manifesto season, if we're being honest. They wrote this manifesto about what they think the conservative movement should look like going forward, and it didn't attract a lot of attention at the time. The only people that I saw commenting on it, myself included, were mainly like extremely online libertarians who saw this, and it got passed around and it got commented on a little bit, but it didn't really generate a hell of a lot of buzz, not the way that the David French piece has, because obviously that piece is attacking a specific person, and a specific relatively well-liked person that up until Drag Queen Storytime, everybody kind of agreed was pretty solidly conservative, but now apparently isn't, according to the First Things crowd. Like I said, it's the most bizarre thing, and it's like created its own little cottage industry of commentary, and it's still going. And it's like, it's a joke at this point amongst some of us, but there are still people that are just doing thought pieces and then more and more and more commentary. And it has shown this really weird schism that has arisen in the conservative movement. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, well, why do we, libertarians, give a damn what the hell the conservatives are doing and what's going on in their particular conservative movement and their little weird internecine warfare? Here's why. And this is why I wanted to do this episode on the original manifesto against the dead consensus, because I thought about doing this back in March when this first dropped, and I kind of let it go because, like I said, nobody was really discussing it. Like, there wasn't a lot of mention of it or discussion outside of, like I said, a couple of people tweeting about it. So I kind of let it go, and then this whole situation blew up, and I thought, you know what? Maybe it would be a good idea to go back to that original piece, because what is being attacked in the original piece is not conservatism, whatever the hell that word means now. Like, I've been pretty open about, I don't know what the GOP is anymore. I don't know what conservatism is anymore. I don't know what that word is even supposed to mean in 2019. But what is being attacked in the original piece isn't anything that you would consider part of the conservative movement. It is what you would consider to be classic liberal thought, which is libertarian thought. And I don't mean just like the ephemera. I don't mean attacking us about, weed legalization or the Second Amendment or free speech rights. No, it's a direct attack on like core libertarian principles, like personal autonomy and individual freedom. Like basic core level shit that they're rejecting. So, like I said, it ain't about us, but it really kind of is about us and our core beliefs, and that it is being made clear, at least for this faction of the conservative movement, that these ideas, our ideas, have no place in the conservative movement, according to them. Which is pretty fucking wild, considering that the conservative movement has heretofore considered themselves something along the lines of classic liberals. And I keep saying classic liberals because that is a word pairing that seems to be coming back into vogue amongst people who do not want to call themselves libertarians, but are very clearly libertarians. And that's a whole nother ball of wax. Ask me again in 6 months if I'm completely tired of the phrase classical liberal, because I probably will be, because I'm already getting kind of sick of it now, but the whole conversation about people not wanting to use the L word is a whole nother ball of wax that maybe I'll address in another episode. I'm thinking about it. But anyway, this is the reason I wanted to make this episode, is because this is really an attack on us, more so than anybody else. So, wanted to go ahead and go over the original piece, the Against the Dead consensus, just so you can see and understand, first of all, the origins of the David French attack, because a lot of the things that were mentioned in that particular piece were originally brought up in this piece, and just so you can kind of see, like, where certain people are thinking the conservative movement is going to go post-Trump, because that is a question that I have asked on this podcast too, is what is the conservative movement and what is the GOP going to look like once Trump is gone? Because there will come a day when Trump will no longer be president. Either he'll be voted out or he'll term out. And so what then, especially given how whole hog the GOP and the vast majority of the conservative movement, I say the vast majority because there are never Trumpers out there who have not bought into this idea, but so many have that I don't know how you would back up off of where we're at right now. So, with all that in mind, let's go ahead and get into the piece itself. So, as I said, the title of the piece is Against the Dead Consensus, and it is an op-ed that is signed by multiple people, so there's no one author. Although, ironically enough, going back and looking back at this, Sohrab Ahmani is actually the first co-signer on this piece, so I thought that was kind of ironic and interesting. And this was originally published back in March 21st. So before we get into this piece, let me try to explain something a little bit about the consensus of which they speak. After World War II, it was generally accepted amongst conservatives that in order to advance certain goals and to achieve certain aims, that the different factions of the conservative movement should put aside some of their ideological differences within the movement in order to come together to defeat things like communism. This was a huge thing during the Cold War, that there would need to be a conservative consensus to help fight communism and to help fight Soviet Russia, that there needed to be a consensus in order for, like, economic issues, like domestic economic issues, like Reaganism is the example that always gets used of consensus conservatism. But this is something that ever since the Cold War ended, like, and this is not something that's like super new. Like, I can kind of track this going all the way back to like at least like the mid to late 90s, definitely started accelerating in the 2000s of that particular consensus, because it wasn't like we won. We won the Cold War, we defeated the commies, things were good domestically, like, okay, everything's cool. So at that point, you started to see the schisms kind of show up in the conservative movement. And you started to see a little more separation between the different factions. And 2016, I think, at least as far as the conservative movement was concerned, was the culmination of at least 10 years of like ideological fracturing that led to a lot of people buying into Trump, led to people going never Trump, led to a lot of people becoming out and out libertarians or independents. So this is kind of the culmination of that consensus breaking down. So with all that being said, I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of an explanation of the consensus that they're saying is dead, which I do agree with them on that. I mean, it is pretty much dead at this point. But their proposed solution is yikes. So, starting off, the 2016 election laid bare profound but long-hidden ideological differences among America's conservative intellectuals. Some of us heartily supported the Trumpian insurgency. Others reluctantly pulled the lever for Trump. Still others opposed his candidacy, adopted the label Never Trump, or even endorsed Hillary Clinton. Yet, more than 2 years later, we speak with one voice. There is no returning to the pre-Trump conservative consensus that collapsed in 2016. Any attempt to revive the failed conservative consensus that preceded Trump would be misguided and harmful to the right. So you can see where the First Things crowd is already throwing down the gauntlet for tribalism versus coming to some kind of consensus, and basically setting up the idea that either you are 100% with us, or you can't be part of us at all, and we're not going to play with you, and so nanny nanny neener neener, I guess. But I do agree with them that the old conservative consensus is dead. I don't think the way forward for the conservative movement would be to not try to find a new one, especially given that the things that the conservative movement seems to think it needs to fight, or wants to fight, or should be legitimately fighting, is not something that you're really going to be able to accomplish through tribalism and splintering your movement into these little separate sections that don't want to play nice with each other. But hey, I do you guys. I go for it, and I will discuss that concept a little later. I want to get through the rest of this piece before I kind of flesh out my thoughts on that. So, anyway, moving on. We give credit where it is due. Consensus conservatism played a heroic role in defeating communism in the last century by promoting prosperity at home and the expansion of a rules-based international order. At its best, the old consensus defended the natural rights of Americans and the transcendent dignity of the human person as the visible image of the invisible God against the depredations of a totalitarian regime. But even during the Cold War, this conservatism too often tracked the same lodestar liberalism did, namely individual autonomy. The fetishizing of autonomy paradoxically yielded the very tyranny that consensus conservatives claim most to detest. Okay, first of all, lodestar, drink. Second of all, this is what I am talking about when I say that this isn't necessarily an attack on conservatism. It's an attack on classic liberalism / libertarianism. Because if you have a problem with individual autonomy, what the fuck is your solution to that? What is it that you're really proposing here? And I can tell you already, it ain't gonna be something I'm gonna be comfortable with. It's not gonna be something most people are comfortable with. Because some of us can read shit like this and realize that while you're not saying a certain thing, you are proposing a certain thing, and that certain thing is not okay. No. But, moving on. America's public philosophy now puts great stock in the right to define one's own concept of the mystery of human life, as Justice Anthony Kennedy, the libertarian conservative par excellence, wrote while upholding the constitutional right to abortion. But this vastly way to discover the meaning of existence extends to destroying the freedom and lives of others, the unborn child in the case of abortion. Okay, brief side note here. When they use the word libertarian, they're not meaning it as a compliment. As I'm pretty sure they've already made clear, the concepts that we hold dear, our core concepts, are the opposite of what they want. So they're not really trying to use libertarian as a compliment, but more as a derogatory label. Second of all, setting aside the topic of abortion, because, oh my god, I'm still exhausted from that debate. But what is this? I don't understand what this word soup is supposed to be, that the idea of individual autonomy and figuring out kind of the way that you wish to live your life is somehow destroying the freedoms and lives of other people. Like, okay, there are people, again, we're not going to get back into the abortion debate, because we already did this once, and I don't really feel like relitigating it. But, what? And this is an example of, I'm starting to see more people do this on the right too, and it's taking the left's kind of way of arguing, where you take a very emotional issue like abortion and you try to slap it onto what should be a rational discussion, but because you wanted to invoke this very emotional thing, now everybody's going to talk about that emotional thing and not the underlying thing that you actually said, which, I mean, here it's like, it's yeah, I'm very confused about that paragraph. I mean, I'm not. I know what they're saying. Like, I get what they're saying. I'm reading between the lines, but yeah, that one could have been phrased a little better. Anyway, yes, the old consensus conservatives paid lip service to traditional values, but it failed to retard, much less reverse, the eclipse of permanent truths, family stability, communal solidarity, and much else. It surrendered to the pornographisation of daily life, to the culture of death, to the cult of competitiveness. It too often bowed to a poisonous and censorious multiculturalism. Do you see where we're going here, fam? Do you understand what is being said between the lines in this particular paragraph? And again, this is why I brought up the Tucker Carlson monologue from January, because he touched on a lot of these same sorts of things, like the family and birth rates and all that bullshit. But one thing that stands out here, the usage of the phrase communal solidarity. Where have you heard that before? If you're saying not under capitalism, you'd be right. Yeah, that's some pretty hardcore collectivist verbiage right there, guys. And also the kind of sneaking in of multiculturalism as some kind of bad thing. It's like, what are you intimating here? Like, what are you really trying to say? Between the communal solidarity and the thing against multiculturalism, it sounds an awful lot like you're walking right up to a certain line of possibly suggesting that we just need to have a communal society of white peoples and everybody else can get the fuck out. Maybe I'm reading a little too much into that. I don't think I am, though. Moving on. Faced with voters' resounding no to these centrifugal forces, consensus conservatives have grown only more rigid in their certainties. They have elevated prudential judgments and policies into sacred dogmas. These dogmas, free trade on every front, free movement through every boundary, small government is as an end in itself, technological advances as a cure-all, foreclosed debate about the nature and purpose of our common life. Excuse me. First of all, this particular paragraph makes a mistake that a lot of people make on the right and on the left of assuming why the hell people voted for Trump. There is no one reason. There's multiple reasons. Some of them may not be the reasons that you personally did it, but don't make an assumption that because a group of people did the same thing that you did, that means that that group of people agrees with what you're trying to do. Like, don't make that assumption. So, that's the first problem here. I'm sorry, we have a problem with free trade and freedom of movement now? Are you against that? Are you saying that conservatism going forward should be against free trade and freedom of movement and technological advances to better humanity? What? Are you shitting me? Like I said again, this is like an attack on us. Really. I mean, they don't want to mention us by name because apparently they're too chicken shit to add us, but yeah, these are our core principles. And as far as the border situation, okay, that's another hot button contentious thing that I don't really feel like arguing, but I think everybody agrees in freedom of movement. And what is our common life? I'm sorry, what? What do you have a mouse in your pocket? I know you're not talking to me. I do not have a common life with you. I don't have a common life with all of you writ large. I have a common life with the people that I have, like, actual physical interactions with. But what the fuck is our common life? And why do we need to be sacrificing things to it? Things like free trade and freedom of movement. Good God Almighty, these people, this is wild. Like, this is some wild shit. Anyway, moving on, because we're not even halfway through the insanity of this sucker. Consensus conservatism long ago ceased to inquire into the first things, but we will not. We oppose the soulless society of individual affluence. Now, if I hadn't already previously told you that this was a right-wing manifesto, who do you think would have written that line? Would you think it would be somebody from the far right or somebody from the far left? Yeah, but it wasn't somebody from the far left. Horseshoe theory is real, y'all. I keep telling you, you better believe me. But, so again, if you're not for individual affluence, then what are you for? Because that sounds an awful lot like collectivism. But, let's move on. Our society must not prioritize the needs of the childless, the healthy, and the intellectually competitive. I feel very seen right now. Our policy must accommodate the messy demands of authentic human attachments, family, faith, and the political community. We welcome allies who oppose dehumanizing attempts at liberation, such as pornography, designer babies, wombs for rent, and the severing of the link between sex and gender. That last sentence is doing a lot of work. A lot of work. There's a lot of things going on in there. But, so, okay. Having policies that have a particular faith-based component, I seem to remember a certain section of the First Amendment that specifically has an opinion on what government's role should be in the area of faith, and that is that it doesn't have one. So, what the fuck policies do you think you're going to propose based around faith that are going to be even remotely constitutionally legal? Anybody? No. You can't do that. And what is the political community? What? So much of this is just like weird word salad that I guess is meant to invoke a certain reaction, but when you really sit down and look at it, it's like, what do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? And, of course, we have to throw in porn and designer babies and surrogacy and and gender ID. That's a weird mismatch. Okay. These are not really the problems facing the country. But okay, guys, if that's what you want to worry about, go for it. Next up, we stand with the American citizen. In recent years, some have argued for immigration by saying that working-class Americans are less hardworking, less fertile, in some senses less worthy than potential immigrants. Who? Who said that? I have not heard a single damn person say that. In fact, the only part in that line, which is about fertility, the only people going on about birth rates are people on the far right. Nobody else is talking about birth rates. Nobody else cares. It's just you weirdos. So, no, nobody's making that argument. Do not strawman your way through this by saying that people are saying that immigrants are somehow better than native-born Americans. Like, nobody fucking said that. Stop it. We oppose attempts to displace American citizens. Advancing the common good requires standing with, rather than abandoning our countrymen. They are our fellow citizens, not interchangeable economic units. And as Americans, we owe each other a distinct allegiance and must put each other first. Let's go ahead and start with the idea of displacing American citizens. Immigration isn't a zero-sum game. It's not like if you let in one immigrant, you have to kick out one American. Like, nobody's being displaced. I don't understand this particular argument, and I keep seeing it being made, and it's like nobody's saying that immigrants are better than native-born people. We're just saying that immigrants should be allowed to come here. It's not a knock against native-born workers. It's just, like this, it's a very weird, simplistic view of immigration that, again, is one of those that's meant to make a specific emotional reaction instead of somebody actually rationally saying, like, well, that doesn't make any sense. And then, the idea that as Americans, we owe each other allegiance and that we should put each other first. First of all, I don't owe allegiance to anybody. I don't care if we were born in the same country or not. I don't owe anybody that. So this idea that I owe somebody allegiance because we were born on the same side of an imaginary line, you can fuck right off with that. And as far as putting each other first, again, what? Because you were born on the same side of the imaginary line as I am, that all of a sudden I should somehow champion you over an immigrant? I don't fucking know you. I don't know, that immigrant might be better at doing shit than you are. I don't know. And I don't care. I'm not going to just sit here and cheer on somebody because they happen to be born in the same country as I was. And there's a very weird, distinct shade of, like, again, it's that very collectivist idea, and this kind of language really harkens back to a lot of the propaganda that the Soviet Union pushed on their people, that it is your duty as a citizen to take care of other citizens and to put, even if you're going as far as Soviet Union, to put other people's needs ahead of your own, which is obviously the opposite of individualism and autonomy. It's collectivism, which is really, it seems like that's what they're proposing here, is collectivism with some religion smushed on top of it. So, anyway, let's keep going. We reject attempts to compromise on human dignity. In 2013, the Republican National Committee released an autopsy report that proposed compromising on social issues in order to appeal to young voters. In fact, millennials are the most pro-life generation in America, while economic libertarianism isn't nearly as popular as its Beltway proponents imagine. We affirm the non-negotiable dignity of every unborn life and oppose the transhumanist project of radical self-identification. Okay. Another mistake that they're making here is trying to turn conservatism into a single issue platform, and that issue is abortion. Now, are millennials the most pro-life generation? I don't know, and quite frankly, I don't care. There's more to a political movement, or at least there should be more to a political movement, than one wedge issue. So keep bringing up abortion. You're going to, by definition, limit the amount of people who are going to find your political ideology appealing. And it's a problem that exists in conservatism right now. There is very much that either with us or against us on abortion, and there's a lot of people that will tell you that you cannot be a pro-choice Republican or that you can't be a pro-life Democrat, which you can indeed be both of those things if you so want to. So this idea of turning this into just a single abortion issue is kind of stupid. But the thing I really want to point out here is economic libertarianism. That to me sounds like a fancy way of saying fiscally conservative. So are you telling me that the conservative movement will no longer care about fiscal conservatism? Are you really fucking saying that? Because if you are, then what good are you? What are you doing? What are you conserving? What? This is the part that blew me away. I'm like, so not only are you shitting all over the concepts of classic liberalism, you're straight up saying that you don't give a shit about fiscal conservatism anymore. A conservative movement that proposes to be the way forward for conservatism does not care about fiscal responsibility. Absorb that one for a second. All they care about is social issues, and it seems like, in particular, one social issue. What the fuck? You've got to be kidding me. I have never seen in my life any conservative movement that point blank said, now, not to say that they haven't done this in practice, but point blank says, we don't care about fiscal conservatism. And like I said, not that they haven't done it in practice, but I guess we're not even playing lip service to it anymore. I guess it's just the libertarians who are going to care, and nobody else is going to give a shit about deficit spending and taxes and the fact that we can't afford anything, and this is all going to come down like a ton of bricks on millennials and Gen Zers, and they can't see it yet. Okay, I guess nobody gives a shit about fiscal conservatism anymore, except for us. We resist a tyrannical liberalism. We seek to revive the virtues of liberality and neighborliness that many people describe as liberalism. Again, what people? What many people? I've never heard liberalism, either in the classical sense or in the contemporary sense, described any such way. Like, who are these people? Anyway, but we oppose any attempt to conflate American interest with liberal ideology. When an ideological liberalism seeks to dictate our foreign policy and dominate our religious and charitable institutions, tyranny is the result at home and abroad. Now, I'm not entirely sure in this paragraph if they are using the word liberal in the classic sense or the contemporary sense. I am going to assume that they are using it in the classic sense, just based on the rest of this piece. And so again, I guess we're going with nationalism. Like, straight up nationalism. No more, I don't, it's like, they're saying so much without actually using certain words. But when you read between the lines, it's like, I see, so you basically want to go with isolationism. That's where we're going. Alright, guys. We want a country that works for workers. The Republican Party has for far too long held investors and job creators above workers and citizens, dismissing vast swaths of Americans as takers unworthy of its time. Trump's victory, driven in part by his appeal to working-class voters, shows the potential of a political movement that heeds the cries of the working class as much as the demands of capital. Americans take more pride in their identity as workers than their identity as consumers. Economic and welfare policy should prioritize work over consumption. Again, if I did not already previously tell you that this was written for a far-right publication, where do you think that you would read that? Because that sounds like something lifted out of Marx. You're proposing, basically, central planning. That's fucking central planning. Having a state make economic policies is the basis of central planning. No! That's not how this works. It's, oh my god, like, did you stop and really, like, look at what you just wrote? And the whole idea of Americans taking pride in being workers, I'm like, there goes that commie Soviet shit again. Because that's the same propaganda that they used on them, is that it's important to be a worker, and you should do it because the country needs you. And it's like, okay, first of all, people need to stop finding their identity in their work. Like, you need to have something more in your life anyway. No matter what system we live under, you need to have an identity outside of your work. But apparently, according to the First Things crowd, it's not that way. Like, you should be basing your identity around your work and your work ethic. And there is a very Protestant strain of thought going on there. But back to the idea of economic and welfare policy. Like I said, the state making economic policies is central planning. That doesn't end well. So let's not do that. And as far as welfare policies, I mean, I'm so old. I remember when conservatives thought that the state should not meddle in economic affairs and that the welfare state should be drastically reduced, if not eliminated. How the hell did we get here? What the fuck? It's wild to see a purportedly conservative outlet outright propose these sorts of things. I can't. But we're almost done, so we're going to get here. We believe home matters. For those who enjoy the upsides, a borderless world brings intoxicating new liberties. They can go anywhere, work anywhere. They can call themselves citizens of the world. But the jet-setter's vision clashes with the human need for a common life, and it has bred resentments that are only beginning to surface. We embrace the new nationalism insofar as it stands against the utopian ideal of a borderless world that, in practice, leads to universal tyranny. Whatever else may be said about it, the Trump phenomenon has opened up space in which to pose these questions anew. We will guard that space jealously, and we respectfully decline to join with those who would resurrect warmed-over Reaganism and foreclose honest debate. So, just to reiterate, yes, they support full-on nationalism. I swear to God, like I said, this is basically an attack on libertarians. And it's just like, oh, I mean, I don't even know what to say about the borderless world thing. I don't know of anybody who really, well, I do know of some people who advocate eliminating borders. Yours truly partially included in that. But this idea that somehow people being able to freely move about the planet and freely associate and live and work and live the lives that they wish to live will somehow result in some kind of universal tyranny. I don't even know what to say to that other than, what the fuck makes you think that? Like, what gave you that idea? I don't know what to say to these people. Like, this is just so nuts. And we have now apparently officially gotten to the point where conservatives are willing to throw Reagan under the bus. Ronald Reagan, their god, is now under the wheels of the bus, apparently. It's like I said, this whole thing has just been nuts. And it's just like, this is going to be the future of conservatism? Okay. But I was reminded of something while I was reading Michael Malice's new book. He mentioned parts in that book about Pat Buchanan and the whole death of the West idea, and it dawned on me, it's like, that's what this is. It's warmed over Buchananite paleoconservatism, which has already been tried once and failed, which is how we got here. So basically, you want to go back to a failed ideology. What the fuck sense does that make? You can't go backwards to something that didn't work. Are you stupid? And it's just the whole idea, and this is something that you see a lot in conservatism now, is this idea of going back to a simpler time, which, first off, where is this utopian simpler time that you speak of? Second of all, that's not how time works. We go forward. We don't go backwards. Like, there's no going back. There's only going forward. So this whole nostalgia trip that conservatism seems to be on right now is just like, what are you guys talking about? And it's just, it's wild. It's completely wild and nuts, and certainly is not inclusive of any kind of libertarian thought, obviously, because they pretty much just promoted straight up collectivism and central planning. Like, that's what that whole thing promoted. Collectivism and central planning. And that's the new conservatism. Okay. That sounds an awful lot like the old socialist platform. But hey, you guys, you can have that, I suppose. But the thing that I want to point out, and the thing that I want to close off with, and kind of probably the biggest point I want to make in this episode, is this idea that I see this happening a lot on social media and other various sorts of places, and that is the idea of the politically homeless. Now, if this is what conservatism wants to look like, there are going to be a lot of people that currently identify as conservatives, and this isn't an in the future thing. This is a thing that is starting to happen now because of Trump and because of this bullshit right here. People who are fiscally conservative and socially liberal, who all of a sudden feel like they don't have a place where they belong anymore. And to them I say, hey, hi, we're right over here. Right here. You can come, hang out with us, and be part of us. Libertarians are right here. We're what you're looking for. We're the tent that you're looking for. It already exists. It's right here. And like I said, there's a lot of people, and I suspect there will be even more so going forward, who are readopting the classical liberal label. And I know the word libertarian has a lot of baggage to it, and like I said, I think I will explore that in a later episode. Maybe somebody in particular I might want to talk to about that, but there is going to be this uptick of people who would fit under the libertarian banner, who are all of a sudden, who were conservative or identified as conservative, who are by hook or by crook about to be kicked out of conservatism. Like, if David French wasn't conservative enough for you and y'all kicked him off the island, like, I can only imagine how some other people are going to fare under this new little regime that they're trying to enact under conservatism. So I think that this is an opportunity to try to reach out to some of these people and to kind of try to bring them into the fold. Like, come on, just come on down. We're nice people. We're a little weird sometimes, and it's cool. It's fine. But we're nice people, and we're friendly, and at least in libertarianism, we do still allow for disagreements amongst each other, which is more than I can say for conservatism or the far left, whatever they are calling themselves nowadays. So, on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up on a hopeful note that, hopefully maybe in the next couple of years, maybe we'll start seeing more people actually identify as libertarian, because apparently the other two parties are determined to throw themselves off of a cliff, and we're right here, and we're accepting new members. So, at this point, as always, if you did make it this far, thank you for listening. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Take care, and until next time.